Marcus Chen sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, quietly eating his lunch, while the other cadets laughed loudly at nearby tables. At 22, he was older than most of the recruits at the Galactic Defense Academy, but his small frame and soft voice made him seem younger. His dark hair fell across his eyes as he read from a worn paperback book, ignoring the pointed stares and whispered comments from his classmates. "Look at him," sneered Jake Morrison, a tall blonde cadet with muscles that strained against his uniform, reading some ancient book instead of studying combat manuals. How did someone like that even get into the academy? The other cadets at Jake's table chuckled. Sarah Williams, a sharp-featured girl with short red hair, shook her head in disgust. "My father says they're letting anyone in these days. It's probably some diversity program for weaklings." Marcus pretended not to hear, but his grip tightened on his book. He had heard these comments every day for the past 6 months since arriving at the academy. The other cadets saw him as an easy target, quiet, bookish, and seemingly defenseless. They didn't know about the nightmares that kept him awake, or the memories he worked so hard to suppress. During combat training that afternoon, Instructor Rodriguez paired the cadets for sparring matches. Marcus found himself facing Jake, who grinned maliciously as they circled each other on the practice mat. The other cadets gathered around, eager to watch what they expected to be a one-sided beating. "Try not to cry when I'm done with you, Jake," taunted, throwing a heavy punch toward Marcus's face. Marcus moved at the last second, letting the punch glide past his ear. Jake stumbled forward, off balance, but quickly recovered and swung again. This time Marcus stepped back, his movements fluid and precise. To the watching cadets, it looked like he was simply trying to avoid getting hit. They laughed and called out encouragement to Jake. "Stop running, coward," Jake shouted, growing frustrated as his attacks continued to miss their mark. Marcus said nothing, his face calm and expressionless. He continued to dodge and weave, never striking back, never showing aggression. When Jake finally landed a glancing blow to his shoulder, Marcus allowed himself to fall backward, ending the match. "Pathetic," Jake spat, standing over him. "Don't belong here with real warriors." Instructor Rodriguez frowned but said nothing. He had noticed something the other cadets missed. Marcus's movements had been too precise, too controlled for someone with no training. But the young man's records showed no military background, no combat experience. It's just a civilian who had scored impossibly high on the academy's entrance exams. After class, Marcus walked alone to his dormitory room. The corridors were empty, except for a few maintenance robots humming quietly as they cleaned. His room was small and sparse, containing only the basic furniture provided to all cadets. On his desk sat a single framed photograph, a family portrait showing Marcus as a child with his parents and younger sister, all of them smiling at a birthday party. He picked up the photograph, his fingers tracing the glass over his sister's face. Emma had been only 8 years old, with the same dark hair and gentle eyes as Marcus. She had loved adventure stories and dreamed of exploring distant planets. Marcus closed his eyes, remembering her laughter, the way she would beg him to read to her before bed. That night, like every night, Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The other cadets in nearby rooms were probably sleeping peacefully, dreaming of glory and heroism. Marcus knew he wouldn't sleep until exhaustion finally claimed him in the early hours of morning. When sleep did come, it would bring the dreams, the screaming, the fire. The creatures with too many teeth and eyes like black holes. The next morning brought news that sent excitement rippling through the academy. Admiral Reyes, the academy's commander, called all cadets to the main auditorium for a special announcement. Marcus filed in with the others, taking a seat in the back row as usual. Admiral Reyes was a stern woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun and scars on her hands that spoke of real combat experience. She stood at the podium, her sharp eyes scanning the assembled cadets. "As you know, graduation is still 6 months away," she began, her voice carrying easily through the large room. "However, the Galactic Council has decided to implement a new testing program. A select group of cadets will be chosen to participate in real-world survival exercises on classified worlds." Excited murmurs filled the auditorium. Real missions were usually reserved for fully graduated officers. Admiral Reyes raised her hand for silence. These will not be training exercises with safety nets and rescue protocols, she continued. You will be dropped on hostile worlds with minimal equipment and expected to survive for 72 hours. The environments will test every skill you have learned, and some you haven't. Not all of you will return. Excitement in the room shifted to nervous energy. Several cadets exchanged worried glances. Selection will be based on a combination of factors: academic scores, physical fitness ratings, psychological evaluations, and instructor recommendations. Those chosen will have 48 hours to prepare before departure. First group leaves Monday. As the cadets filed out of the auditorium, Jake and his friends were already making plans. They were confident they would be selected. They had top marks in combat training and physical fitness. I hope they send us somewhere with actual enemies to fight, Jake boasted. I'm tired of practice dummies and simulation programs. Marcus walked past them without a word, but Sarah Williams called out to him. Hey, Bookworm, don't worry about getting selected. I'm sure they have plenty of safe desk jobs waiting for someone like you. The group laughed, but Marcus just kept walking. He had a sinking feeling in his stomach, though he couldn't explain why. Something about Admiral Reyes's announcement troubled him. The way she had emphasized that not everyone would return, the mention of hostile worlds and minimal equipment, it reminded him too much of another place, another time. That evening, Marcus received a message on his personal communicator. His name was on the selection list. In 48 hours, he would be boarding a transport ship to an unnamed world for his survival test. The message included basic equipment, specifications, and reminded him to update his emergency contacts. Marcus stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. He had no emergency contacts to update. His family was gone, and he had no friends at the academy. If something happened to him on this test, no one would mourn his loss. Perhaps that was for the best. Some things were better left buried, and some monsters were better left sleeping. The transport ship hummed quietly through space as 12 selected cadets sat in uncomfortable metal seats, reviewing their mission briefings. Marcus sat near the back as usual, while Jake and his group dominated the front section with loud conversation and nervous laughter. Captain Torres, their mission supervisor, stood at the front of the cargo bay. She was a weathered woman with cybernetic implants replacing her left eye and arm, casualties from her own survival tests years earlier. Listen up, cadets, she announced, her voice cutting through the chatter. In 30 minutes, you'll be dropped on Kepler 438b. The locals call it Shadowmere. It's a Class 7 death world, with an ecosystem designed to kill anything that doesn't belong there. The casual conversations died as the gravity of their situation sank in. Sarah Williams raised her hand. What exactly makes it a Class 7, Captain?
Predators.
That hunt in coordinated packs, toxic atmosphere during certain weather patterns, and terrain that shifts without warning, Captain Torres replied matter-of-factly. The gravity is also 30% higher than Earth's standard. Your bones will feel like they're made of lead after the first few hours. Marcus felt a familiar chill run down his spine. The description triggered memories he had spent 3 years trying to forget. Another world, another mission, another group of people who didn't know what they were walking into. Your equipment is minimal by design, Captain Torres continued, gesturing to the small packs beside each cadet's seat. Basic survival gear, 3 days of emergency rations, a standard plasma rifle with 2 power cells, and a beacon that will activate after 72 hours. Use the rifle wisely. Once those power cells are drained, you're on your own. Jake examined his rifle with obvious excitement. What kind of predators are we talking about, Captain? Anything we can't handle? Captain's cybernetic eye-word as it focused on him. The kind that ate the last team of experienced soldiers we sent there 6 months ago? We found pieces of their equipment scattered across a 12-kilometer radius. Never found the bodies. The cargo bay fell silent except for the steady thrum of the ship's engines. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to push down the rising anxiety. He had volunteered for this mission, though he couldn't entirely explain why. Perhaps it was because he was tired of hiding, tired of pretending to be someone he wasn't, or perhaps some part of him wanted to find out if the monster inside him was still there. Drop zone in 10 minutes, Captain Torres announced. Final. Equipment check. Marcus methodically went through his pack. Water purification tablets, basic medical supplies, emergency shelter, nutrient bars that tasted like cardboard. The plasma rifle felt heavy in his hands, its weight both familiar and unwelcome. He had hoped never to hold a weapon again. The other cadets were nervous but trying to hide it behind bravado. Jake was giving a pep talk to his usual group, while Sarah was studying the topographical data on her tablet. A few of the quieter cadets sat in contemplative silence, probably questioning their decision to volunteer. "Remember," Captain Torres called out as the ship began its descent, "this is not a team exercise. You're being dropped at different coordinates. Across a 50-kilometer area, your survival depends on your individual skills and decisions. Trust no one, help no one, survive at all costs." The ship shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Through the small windows, Marcus could see a landscape of twisted black trees and crimson sky. Strange flying creatures with too many wings circled in the distance, and the ground appeared to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. "Chen, you're first," Captain Torres announced as the ship touched down. Marcus stood and shouldered his pack, his face calm despite the turmoil in his mind. The other cadets watched him with a mixture of pity and amusement. They expected him to be the first casualty, probably dead within hours of landing. "Good luck, bookworm," Sarah called out with false sweetness. "Try not to trip over your own feet." Marcus didn't respond. He walked to the cargo door as it hissed open, revealing the alien landscape beyond. The air was thick and humid, carrying strange scents that made his nostrils burn. In the distance, something howled, a sound like grinding metal mixed with human screams. He stepped onto the ramp and turned back one last time. The other cadets were watching him through the doorway, most of them with expressions of mild interest, as if they were watching a nature documentary about prey animals. 72 hours, Captain Torres said simply. "Your beacon will activate automatically. If you're still alive, we'll find you." Marcus nodded and walked down the ramp into the alien wilderness. Behind him, the ship's engines roared to life as it departed to drop the other cadets at their respective coordinates. Within minutes, he was alone under the crimson sky, surrounded by the hostile beauty of Shadowmere. The ground beneath his feet felt spongy, almost alive. The black trees around him swayed without any wind, their branches reaching toward him like grasping fingers. In the distance, he could hear movement, things sliding through the undergrowth. Chittering to each other in languages that predated human civilization, Marcus found a partially concealed position behind a cluster of the strange trees and crouched down to assess his situation. According to his GPS unit, he was at the edge of what the survey teams had designated the Screaming Forest. To the north lay a range of volcanic mountains that belched toxic gas. To the south, a swamp that the previous expedition had named the Bone Garden, though their reports hadn't explained why. He decided to stay put until he had a better understanding of the local threats. As the hours passed, he observed the ecosystem around him with the patience of a trained soldier. The flying creatures he had seen from the ship were scavengers, feeding on the corpses of smaller animals. The trees themselves appeared to be partially carnivorous, their roots emerging from the ground to drag dying creatures into the soil. As night fell, Marcus heard his first sign of real danger. Somewhere in the darkness, something was moving with purposeful intelligence. Not the random wandering of animals, but the calculated approach of predators that had detected prey. He checked his plasma rifle one more time and settled in to wait. The other cadets probably thought he was already dead, torn apart by some alien monster in the first few hours. They had no idea that Marcus Chen was not the helpless bookworm they believed him to be. In the darkness beyond the trees, glowing, eyes began to appear in pairs, then dozens of pairs. The hunters of Shadowmere had found him, and they were moving in for the kill. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For 3 years, he had kept the monster buried. He had been quiet, gentle Marcus Chen, the peaceful bookworm who wouldn't hurt a fly. But now, surrounded by predators on an alien world where only the strong survived, he felt the familiar coldness spreading through his veins. The hunters were about to learn that the quiet human they had cornered was not prey at all. He was something far more dangerous than anything Shadowmere had ever produced. The first creature emerged from the shadows just after midnight. It moved on 6 legs, with joints that bent in ways that defied anatomy. Its body covered in chitinous plates that reflected the alien starlight. Eyes like burning coals studied Marcus from 30 meters away, while behind it, more shapes rustled in the darkness. Marcus remained perfectly still, his breathing controlled and silent. He had learned long ago that movement attracted predators, but stillness made them curious. Curious predators made mistakes. The creature crept closer, its head tilting back and forth as it analyzed this strange new prey. It was roughly the size of a large dog, but its movements suggested intelligence far beyond any Earth animal. Behind it, Marcus counted at least 8 more sets of glowing eyes, all watching and waiting. When the lead creature was 15 meters away, it paused and made a sound like grinding glass. The others responded with similar calls, and Marcus realized they were communicating. These weren't just predators, they were pack hunters with a language and coordination. The lead creature took another step forward, and Marcus moved. His first shot from the plasma rifle took the creature's center mass, the energy blast punching through its chitinous armor and dropping it instantly. Before the others could react, Marcus was already rolling to his left. Finding new cover behind a fallen log, the remaining creatures erupted in a chorus of angry shrieks and charged his position. Ow! Marcus's military training kicked in automatically. Track multiple targets, prioritize threats, conserve ammunition. His second shot caught the fastest creature mid-lip, spinning it into a twisted black tree. His third dropped another that had tried to flank him from the right, but there were too many of them, and they learned quickly. The survivors spread out, using the twisted trees for cover, approaching from multiple angles. Marcus found himself surrounded by intelligent predators who understood tactics. One of the creatures managed to reach his position, its claws raking across his shoulder and tearing through his uniform. Marcus spun and grabbed it by what might have been its throat, using its own momentum to slam it against a tree trunk. The impact made a wet sound, and the creature stopped moving. The others paused, clearly surprised that their prey had killed one of their own with bare hands. In that moment of hesitation, Marcus struck again. He moved through the remaining creatures. Like a shadow, his hands finding pressure points and weak spots with surgical precision. No wasted motion, no unnecessary violence, just efficient, deadly action. When the fight was over, 9 alien predators lay dead around his position. Marcus stood among the corpses, breathing hard but uninjured except for the shallow scratches on his shoulder. He felt the familiar emptiness that always followed combat, not satisfaction or fear. Just a hollow acknowledgement that he had survived. Another encounter. He cleaned his wounds with supplies from his medical kit and moved to a new position. The smell of death would attract scavengers, and he had no desire to fight another battle so soon. As he walked deeper into the screaming forest, Marcus tried to push down the memories that the violence had stirred up. 3 years ago, on a world called Tartarus 7, Sergeant Marcus Chen had been part of an elite military unit tasked with evacuating civilian colonists from a planet under attack by an unknown alien species. The mission had gone wrong from the start. Intelligence had been faulty. Enemy numbers had been underestimated. Half of Marcus's unit had been killed in the first hour of contact. Marcus had been traveling with a group of civilian families. When they were ambushed by creatures similar to the ones he had just killed, the colonists had looked to him for protection. Men, women, and children who trusted that a soldier would keep them safe. Among them had been the Hendricks family, including 8-year-old Emma, who reminded Marcus of his own sister. The battle had lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Marcus was the only survivor. It killed 47 enemy creatures with his bare hands after his ammunition ran out. But it hadn't been enough to save the people he was supposed to protect. He had found Emma's body 3 days later, when the rescue teams finally arrived. The military had called him a hero and given him medals. They said he had shown extraordinary courage and skill under impossible circumstances. But Marcus knew the truth. He hadn't been a hero. He had been a monster a killing machine that had failed when it mattered most. The thing inside him that made him so efficient at dealing death had awakened too late to save the people he cared about. After the medals ceremony, Marcus had resigned his commission and disappeared. For 3 years he had tried to be someone else, quiet, gentle, harmless. He had enrolled in college, studied literature, practiced meditation. He had convinced himself that the monster was gone, that he could be just another normal person living a peaceful life. But when he saw the recruitment notice for the Galactic Defense Academy, something inside him had stirred. Perhaps it was guilt. Or perhaps it was the realization that running from what he was wouldn't make the nightmares stop. Either way, he had applied and been accepted, though he had kept his military background hidden. Now, walking through an alien forest with blood under his fingernails, Marcus wondered if he had made a mistake. The Academy cadets who mocked him had no idea what they were dealing with. They thought he was weak because he was quiet, defenseless because he avoided confrontation. They didn't understand that his gentleness was a choice, not a limitation. As dawn broke over Shadowmere, Marcus found himself at the edge of the screaming forest, looking out over a landscape that defied description. Rolling hills of crystalline formations stretched to the horizon, their surfaces reflecting the alien sunrise in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Between the hills, rivers of what appeared to be liquid metal flowed in impossible directions, defying gravity. According to his GPS, he was now 40 kilometers from his original drop point. In 18 hours of travel, he had encountered and killed 3 different species of predators, crossed terrain that would have challenged a mountain climber, and covered more ground than should have been humanly possible in the planet's heavy gravity. He was also running low on water, despite the purification tablets. The local water sources were contaminated with minerals that made them undrinkable, and his emergency rations were already half depleted. If he was going to survive another 54 hours, he would need to find better resources. As he studied the crystalline landscape ahead, Marcus wondered how the other cadets were faring. Jake and his group had the physical training and confidence, but they lacked real combat experience. Sarah was intelligent and adaptable, but she had never faced anything that actually wanted to kill her. The quieter cadets might have better survival instincts, but this world demanded more than just the will to live. In the distance, Marcus could see movement among the crystal formations. Something large was moving through the valleys between the hills, something that made the ground tremble with its passage. He checked his plasma rifle, still 1 full power cell remaining, plus the partially depleted one currently loaded. Whatever was out there, he would face it like he had faced everything else on this cursed world, with cold efficiency and the terrible knowledge that sometimes, to survive, one had to become the very thing that others feared most. The quiet human was gone, buried under the weight of necessity and the demands of survival. What remained was the weapon that had once been Sergeant Marcus Chen, now awakened and ready to do whatever was required to see another sunrise. The creature that emerged from the Crystal Valley was unlike anything in Marcus's military files. It stood 12 feet tall on 4 legs thick as tree trunks, its hide covered in natural armor that shifted colors like oil on water. 2 massive heads grew from its shoulders, each one equipped with rows of teeth that looked capable of biting through steel. Most disturbing were its eyes, too intelligent, too aware, as if it understood exactly what Marcus was thinking. Marcus crouched behind a formation of red crystals and watched the beast patrol the valley floor below. It moved with purpose, following what appeared to be a regular route between the metallic streams. Every few minutes it would pause and raise both heads, sniffing the air with nostrils that flared like organic radar dishes. He was considering a detour around the creature when his communicator crackled to life with an emergency signal. Transmission was weak and filled with static, but he could make out a human voice. Female, panicked, and very much alive. "This is Cadet Williams, ... Please respond. Trapped in the crystal caves, ... Something hunting me, ... Running out of time, ... Sarah's voice cut through the static for a moment before dissolving back into white noise. Marcus checked his GPS. The signal was coming from approximately 2 kilometers northeast, deep in the heart of the crystal formations. To reach her, he would have to get past the 12-foot guardian and navigate terrain that looked like a death trap. Marcus stared at the communicator for several long seconds. Sarah Williams had spent 6 months making his life miserable at the academy. She had mocked his quiet nature, questioned his right to be there, and encouraged others to see him as a target. She was also Jake Morrison's girlfriend, and the two of them had made it their personal mission to ensure Marcus knew he didn't belong. The rational choice was to ignore the distress call. This was a survival test, not a rescue mission, Captain. Torres had specifically told them to trust no one and help no one. Sarah's survival was her own responsibility, but as Marcus listened to the static-filled transmission, he heard something that made his decision for him. In the background behind Sarah's voice, there was another sound, a high-pitched whining that he recognized from his nightmares. The same sound the creatures on Tartarus 7 had made when they were preparing to feed. Marcus secured his equipment and began moving toward the valley. The massive predator was facing away from him, both heads focused on something in the distance. Marcus used the creature's distraction to slip from crystal formation to crystal formation. Staying low and moving with practiced silence, he was halfway across the valley when the beast detected him. Both heads swiveled in his direction with mechanical precision, and Marcus found himself staring into 4 eyes that held an alien intelligence. The creature made a sound like grinding stone and began moving toward him with surprising speed for something so large. Marcus broke cover and ran, using the crystal formations as obstacles between himself and the pursuing monster. The creature's claws sparked against the crystalline ground as it gave chase, its massive bulk surprisingly agile among the narrow passages. A shard of crystal the size of a spear suddenly erupted from the ground directly in front of Marcus, missing his head by centimeters. The creature wasn't just chasing him, it was somehow controlling the crystal formations, turning the entire landscape into a weapon. Marcus dove behind a cluster of blue crystals, just as another wave of spikes burst from the ground, where he had been standing. The creature roared in frustration, both heads weaving back and forth as it searched for its prey. From his hiding spot, Marcus could see the caves where Sarah's signal was originating. They were carved into the base of a large crystal mountain, their entrances glowing with an eerie phosphorescent light. But between him and the caves stood the massive predator. And Marcus was beginning to understand that this creature was more than just another animal. It was the guardian of this entire region. A new transmission crackled through his communicator. Please, ... someone. They're getting closer. I can hear them in the tunnels, ... Marcus closed his eyes and made a decision that went against every survival instinct he possessed. He stepped out from behind the crystal formation and walked directly toward the massive creature. His hands raised in a gesture that might have been surrender. The beast stopped moving, both heads tilting in apparent confusion. This prey was behaving unlike anything in its experience. Instead of running or fighting, a small human was approaching voluntarily. When Marcus was 10 feet away from the creature, he stopped and spoke in a calm, quiet voice. I know what you are. You're not just a predator. You're intelligent.
Ouch!
Understand me, don't you? One of the heads lowered to study him more closely. It's massive, reflecting Marcus's image in fractured patterns. The creature made a low, rumbling sound that might have been communication. There's someone in those caves who's going to die if I don't help her, Marcus continued. I'm not asking you to let me pass. I'm asking you to come with me. The creatures' heads exchanged a look that was disturbingly human in its expressiveness. After a moment that felt like an eternity, the beast stepped aside and gestured toward the caves with one massive claw. Marcus nodded his thanks and began walking toward the cave entrance, the 12-foot guardian following close behind. As they approached the glowing tunnels, the sounds from within became clearer, skittering footsteps, clicking mandibles, and the wet sliding of bodies through tight spaces. Sarah's voice echoed from deep within the cave system. Stay back. Morning. I still have ammunition. Marcus entered the caves with his plasma rifle ready, the massive creature somehow managing to squeeze through the tunnel behind him. The phosphorescent glow came from growths on the cave walls, some kind of alien fungus that provided just enough light to navigate by? They found Sarah 20 minutes later, cornered in a dead-end chamber by 6 creatures that looked like a cross between spiders and wolves. She was backed against the wall, her plasma rifle pointed at the nearest attacker. But Marcus could see that her hands were shaking with exhaustion and fear. The spider wolves turned when they heard footsteps, their multiple eyes reflecting the cave's eerie light. When they saw Marcus and his companion, they made the high-pitched whining sound he remembered from Tartarus 7. Not a sound of aggression, but one of fear. The massive crystal guardian stepped forward and made a sound like an earthquake. The spider wolves immediately backed away from Sarah, their heads lowered in submission. After a moment of tense silence, they scurried away into the depths of the cave system. Leaving the 3 survivors alone in the phosphorescent chamber, Sarah stared at Marcus with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. How did you do that? How did you get that thing to help you? Marcus looked at the massive creature, which was now settled on its haunches like an enormous 2-headed dog. I asked nicely, he said simply. Sarah's expression shifted as she really looked at Marcus for the first time. The quiet bookworm she had mocked for 6 months was gone, replaced by someone who moved with deadly precision and spoke to alien monsters as if they were old friends. This was not the harmless weakling she had thought she knew. We need to get out of here, Marcus said, checking his GPS. We still have 36 hours left, and this world has more surprises waiting for us. As they prepared to leave the caves, Sarah realized that everything she thought she knew about Marcus Chen had been wrong. The other cadets back at the academy had no idea what they had been dealing with. The quiet human they had mocked and dismissed was something far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. Sarah followed Marcus through the crystal caves in stunned silence, her mind struggling to process what she had witnessed. The massive 2-headed creature that had terrified her beyond reason now walked beside them like a loyal companion, occasionally using its claws to clear obstacles from their path. Your shoulder is bleeding, Sarah observed as they emerged from the caves into the alien. Daylight Marcus glanced at the scratches he had received during his first encounter with the pack hunters. The wounds had reopened during his run-through the Crystal Valley, and his uniform was stained with blood. It's nothing serious, he replied, but Sarah was already pulling medical supplies from her pack. Sit down, she ordered, with the authority she normally reserved for intimidating weaker cadets. Those wounds need proper treatment before they get infected. To her surprise, Marcus complied without argument, settling onto a flat crystal formation, while their massive guardian took up a watchful position nearby. As Sarah cleaned and bandaged his wounds, she found herself studying this person she thought she had known. You're not who you pretended to be at the academy, she said quietly. Marcus was silent for a moment, watching the alien landscape around them. None of us are who we pretend to be. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Sarah secured the bandage and sat back. You move like a soldier, trained one. And that thing with the creature back there, you talked to it like you'd done something similar before. Marcus stood and shouldered his pack. We should keep moving. The scavengers will have detected the scent of blood by now. Sarah grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. Stop deflecting. I saved my plasma rifle charge by lying to those spider things about having ammunition. The least you can do is answer one honest question. Marcus looked at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes. For a moment, Sarah saw something in his expression that made her take a step backward, a coldness that had nothing to do with the alien. Environment. What do you want to know? He asked. Who are you really? Don't tell me you're just some college student who scored well on entrance exams. Marcus was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. He finally spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper. 3 years ago, I was Sergeant Marcus Chen, 47th Reconnaissance Division. I was part of a unit that specialized in hostile environment operations. We were sent to evacuate civilian colonists from a planet under attack by an unknown species. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind blowing across the crystal formations. Tartarus 7, she whispered. Marcus nodded. You know about it? Everyone in the military knows about Tartarus 7. It was the worst colonial disaster in 50 years. An entire planet evacuated under fire, thousands of casualties, and one survivor who... She stopped, her eyes widening. The ghost of Tartarus. The soldier who fought for 6 hours after his unit was wiped out. Who killed 47 enemy combatants with improvised weapons after his ammunition ran out? 47 confirmed, Marcus corrected quietly. There were probably more. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. The ghost of Tartarus was a legend in military circles, a story told to inspire soldiers about the lengths a person could go to protect others. She had never imagined that the mythical figure was a quiet college student sitting in the back of her academy classes. But the reports said the ghost was killed in action. There's a memorial statue in the Central Command building with your name on it. I asked them to list me as Kia, Marcus said. The person who fought on Tartarus 7 died with everyone else he failed to protect. I just borrowed his body long enough to get revenge. Their conversation was interrupted by a distant sound, the whine of plasma weapons being discharged repeatedly, followed by humans shouting. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances before Marcus checked his GPS. 2 kilometers south, he said someone's in trouble. Sarah looked at their alien companion, which had raised both heads and was sniffing the air with obvious concern. Another rescue mission? This one's different, Marcus replied, shouldering his rifle. That's Jake's voice. They found the battle. 20 minutes later, after following a trail of destruction through the crystal formations, Jake Morrison and 2 other cadets, Davis and Jong, were pinned down behind a cluster of broken crystals. Facing off against something that defied description, the creature was roughly humanoid in shape, but stood 15 feet tall, its body composed of what appeared to be living shadow held together by points of brilliant light. It moved like liquid darkness, flowing around obstacles and reforming itself after taking hits from plasma fire.
What is that thing?
Sarah whispered as they observed the battle from a safe distance. Marcus studied the creature with the analytical mind of a trained soldier. Energy being, he said after a moment. The plasma fire is feeding it, making it stronger. Bide. They're doing exactly the wrong thing. Jake's voice carried across the crystal formations as he shouted orders to his companions. Keep firing. Don't let it get closer. The shadow creature absorbed another barrage of plasma bolts and grew visibly larger, its form becoming more solid and defined. The points of light within its body pulsed brighter, and when it moved toward the cadets, the ground beneath its feet turned to glass from the intense heat it radiated. We have to help them, Sarah said, checking her own weapon. Marcus shook his head. Plasma fire will only make it stronger. And if we reveal ourselves, we become targets too. So we just watch them die. Marcus looked at their crystal guardian, which was watching the battle with both heads tilted in apparent interest. Not necessarily.
Ow.
He walked toward the massive creature and placed his hand on one of its armored legs.
Oh.
The beast looked down at him with one enormous eye. That shadow thing, Marcus said, pointing toward the battle. It doesn't belong here, does it? It's disrupting your territory. The guardian made a low rumbling sound that might have been agreement. Both heads turned toward the energy being, and Marcus could see intelligence calculating behind those alien eyes. If you help us drive it away, I'll make sure my people leave your domain peacefully, Marcus offered. The creature considered this for a moment, then rose to its full height and began walking toward the battle. Marcus and Sarah followed at a safe distance, watching as their unlikely ally approached the energy being. Jake saw them coming and shouted a warning. Look out, there's another one. We're surrounded. The shadow creature turned to face this new threat, its form rippling with anticipation. It had absorbed enough energy from the plasma fire to be confident in its ability to handle any challenge. But when the Crystal Guardian attacked, it didn't use claws or teeth. Instead, it planted all 4 feet firmly on the ground and began to sing. The sound that emerged from both heads was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard, a harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate in her bones. The crystal formations around them began to glow brighter. Responding to the Guardian's call, the shadow creature's reaction was immediate and violent. Its form began to destabilize, the points of light within its body flickering erratically. The energy being let out a shriek that sounded like tearing metal and began retreating toward the mountains. The Guardian's song intensified, and every crystal formation in the valley joined the chorus. The harmonic frequency created a barrier of pure sound that the energy being couldn't cross. Within minutes, the shadow creature had fled beyond the mountain range, its form scattered and weakened. Jake and his companions emerged from cover, staring. In disbelief at Marcus and Sarah, Jake's usual confidence was gone, replaced by genuine fear and confusion. "Chen," Jake stammered. "What, ... how did you?" "What is that thing?" Marcus walked over to examine the cadet's injuries. Davis had burns on his arm from getting too close to the energy being, and Zhang was suffering from severe dehydration. Appeared physically unharmed but was clearly in shock. "It's a territorial guardian," Marcus explained as he helped treat Davis's wounds. "This entire region belongs to it." The shadow creature was an invasive species that didn't belong here. "But how did you know that?" Zhang asked weakly. "How did you communicate with it?" Sarah looked at Marcus, waiting to see how much he would reveal. Marcus finished bandaging Davis's arm before answering. "I paid attention during the briefings," he said simply. "Class 7 death worlds always have apex predators that maintain ecological balance. Sometimes you can work with them instead of against them." Jake stared at Marcus with new understanding. The bookworm, who had never fought back during their training sessions, had just negotiated with an alien monster and saved their lives. "Your ammunition," Marcus observed, noting their depleted power cells. "You're down to emergency reserves." "Ran into a pack of those spider wolves earlier," Jake admitted reluctantly. "Burned through most of our charges fighting them off." Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. The spider wolves had fled from Marcus and the Guardian without a fight, but Jake's group had wasted precious ammunition on creatures that could have been avoided. "There's a shelter formation about 5 kilometers north," Marcus said, checking his GPS. "We can rest there until the extraction beacon activates." Sarah asked. Marcus looked at the 3 exhausted cadets, then at their crystal guardian, which was settling back into a resting position.
Ow.
The test was about survival. Of us surviving together sends a stronger message than any of us surviving alone. As they prepared to move toward the shelter, Jake approached Marcus with an expression he had never worn before, respect mixed with genuine curiosity. "Chen," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. We all do. We thought you were weak." Marcus shouldered his pack and began walking toward the shelter. "Weakness and strength aren't always what they appear to be, Morrison. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who chooses not to fight." Behind them, the Crystal Guardian watched her departure with what might have been approval before settling down to resume its eternal watch over the valley. The quiet human had proven himself worthy of respect, not just from his fellow cadets, but from the ancient intelligence that ruled this corner of an alien world. The extraction beacon activated at exactly 72 hours, its signal piercing the alien sky like a blue star. Marcus stood on a ridge overlooking their makeshift camp, watching the transport ship descend through Shadowmere's crimson atmosphere below. The 5 surviving cadets, prepared for departure. Davis and Zhang had recovered from their injuries with rest and proper treatment. Sarah moved with new confidence, her experience in the caves having taught her things no academy simulation could provide. Jake stood apart from the others, staring at Marcus with an expression that mixed admiration with something approaching fear. The Crystal Guardian had departed at dawn, but not before a final exchange with Marcus that the other cadets couldn't quite understand. The massive creature had touched its head to Marcus's shoulder in what seemed like a gesture of respect, then disappeared into the crystal formations where it would continue its eternal watch. Captain E. Torres emerged from the transport as it touched down, her cybernetic eye scanning the group of survivors. She had expected casualties. The previous team sent to Shadowmere had suffered a 60% fatality rate. Finding all 5 cadets alive and relatively unharmed was unprecedented. She commanded as the cadets assembled before her. Jake stepped forward, but before he could speak, Sarah interrupted. "Cadet Chen took command of our survival efforts, Captain. Without his leadership, none of us would have made it." Captain Torres's cybernetic eye-word as it focused on Marcus. "Is that accurate, Morrison?" Jake hesitated, clearly struggling with the admission. Yes, Captain. Chen organized our shelter, negotiated with local predators, and coordinated rescue. Operations for team members in distress, negotiated with predators. Captain Torres raised an eyebrow. Marcus stepped forward. The local ecosystem is dominated by intelligent species that can be reasoned with under the right circumstances. Combat should be a last resort, not a first option. The captain studied Marcus for a long moment, her experienced eye noting details the other cadets had missed. The way he stood, the efficiency of his movements, the calm assessment of his surroundings, all markers of someone with real combat experience. How many enemy contacts did you engage, Cadet Chen? 43 confirmed eliminations, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. It's mostly pack hunters and scavengers. No unnecessary violence. Other cadets stared at him in shock. 43 kills in 72 hours was more than most soldiers saw in entire deployments. Sarah felt a chill as she remembered the spider wolves fleeing from Marcus in the caves. She had assumed the Guardian's presence had frightened them, but now she wondered if they had recognized something far more dangerous. "And your ammunition status?" Captain Torres asked. Marcus held up his plasma rifle. 1 power cell remaining, 60% charge. Captain Torres's expression shifted to something approaching amazement. 43 confirmed kills with minimal ammunition expenditure suggested a level of combat efficiency that belonged in special operations units, not academy training programs.
Out!
"Load up," she ordered. "We'll debrief once we're back at the academy." The flight back to the academy, Marcus sat in his usual position at the back of the transport. But this time he wasn't alone. Sarah sat beside him, while Jake and the others cast frequent glances in his direction. The dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Marcus was no longer the target of their mockery, but the center of their curiosity and respect. "You're not going back to the academy, are you?" Sarah asked quietly. Marcus looked out the window at the stars streaming past. "My test is over. I learned what I needed to know. Which was that I can't keep running from what I am." Marcus turned to meet her gaze. "For 3 years I tried to be someone else. I thought if I was quiet enough, gentle enough, I could bury the soldier and become just another civilian. But Shadowmere showed me that's not possible." Sarah nodded slowly. "So what happens now? Now I stop pretending." Marcus closed his eyes and leaned back in his seat. The military needs soldiers who understand that sometimes the greatest strength comes from choosing not to fight. And sometimes, when fighting is necessary, they need someone who can end it quickly. The transport docked at the academy 12 hours later. As the cadets disembarked, word of their survival had already spread through the corridors. Class 7. Deathworld survival with 0 casualties was unheard of, and Marcus found himself at the center of attention for the first time in his academy career. But the attention was different now. Instead of mockery and dismissal, he saw respect and curiosity. Cadets who had previously ignored him now watched with interest as he passed. Instructors who had written him off as unsuitable for command roles began to reassess their evaluations. Reyes was waiting in her office when Marcus arrived for his mandatory debrief. The academy commander studied him across her desk with the sharp eyes of someone who had seen real combat. "Sit down, cadet," she ordered. Marcus took the offered chair, his posture relaxed but alert. Admiral Reyes opened a file on her desk and began reading. Marcus Chen, age 25, civilian background, no military service listed. Enrolled in the academy 18 months ago, after scoring perfect marks on all entrance examinations. She looked up at him, except that's not entirely accurate, is it? Marcus said nothing, waiting to see how much she knew. "I ran a deeper background check after Captain Torres's preliminary report. Interesting thing about military records, even classified ones, leave traces if you know where to look." Admiral Reyes leaned forward. The ghost of Tartarus was supposedly killed in Action 3. Years ago. But ghosts have a way of coming back when they're needed? Marcus met her gaze without flinching. Sergeant Marcus Chen died on Tartar 7. Admiral. He died with everyone he failed to protect. And yet here you are, having just led 4 cadets. Through a survival scenario that should have killed at least half of them? Admiral Reyes closed the file. The question is, what do we do with a dead man who keeps saving lives? Marcus considered his answer carefully. You give him a chance to do what he should have done 3 years ago, train others to be better than he was. Admiral Reyes smiled, the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from her. Instructor positions don't usually open up until after graduation, Cadet. I'm not asking for a teaching position, Admiral. I'm asking for a chance to serve again, in whatever capacity you see fit. The Admiral stood and walked to her window, which looked out over the Academy's training grounds. Below, cadets practiced combat maneuvers and survival techniques, preparing for challenges they couldn't yet imagine. The Academy needs instructors who understand real combat, not just simulation, she said finally. Sometimes the best teachers are those who have learned from their failures as well as their successes. Marcus stood as well, recognizing the dismissal in her tone. Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me yet, Chen. Or should I say, Instructor Chen. Admiral Reyes turned back to face him. Your first assignment will be training the next group of cadets selected for Death World survival. Make sure they're better prepared than the last team. As Marcus left the Admiral's office, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that had been there for 3 years. The ghost of Tartarus could finally rest. In its place stood someone new, not the broken soldier who had failed to save everyone, and not the hiding civilian who had denied his nature. Marcus Chen, instructor and guardian, ready to ensure that the next generation of soldiers would be strong enough to protect those who needed protection, wise enough to choose their battles carefully, and skilled enough to win when fighting became necessary. The quiet human who had been mocked for his gentleness would now teach others that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary and the courage to bear that burden when others could not. In the Academy corridors, word spread quickly about the instructor who had survived Shadowmere with 0 casualties. Cadets whispered stories about the quiet man who could negotiate with alien monsters and eliminate 43 enemies without breaking a sweat. The monster had been unleashed on the Death World test, but it had returned as something more. A teacher who understood that the greatest warriors were those who fought only when all other options had been exhausted, who carried the weight of necessary violence so others wouldn't have to.